Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Sergio Melgar, and here we are. It's been a while. Welcome to Laws of Life Forum. We are thrilled to be back with you. Thank you for watching. I know it's been a while, but we have an incredible show and an incredible panel today. I am so thrilled. I cannot wait to introduce every one of them to you. So we're going to go ahead and start with to my right here, we have Brother Steve. Why don't you, how you doing today?
Good, Sergio.
It's good to be here.
It's good to be on the Laws of Life Forum with you.
Yes, thank you for being here. Would you mind telling us a
Sure.
little bit about yourself?
So I'm Steve Gordon, and currently I serve as the chairman of the board for the Center for Jail Transformation, among my various interests, and done a lot of things in my life, but I think this is probably the best thing I've done, and we're trying to help jails in the United States, county jails, really change the way they do business for the Lord. So that's going to be a whole other show, probably.
That is fascinating. We definitely need to look at doing a future show with just that theme
Yeah, it's
involved
fascinating work.
because we are talking a lot about justice today, as you'll hear more about that. Now we have an amazing lady here. She is the president of Vision Productions International. This is Elizabeth Waters. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sergio. It's amazing to be here today on this forum, Laws of Life Forum, and I'm just excited about what God is going to do here today.
On. Let's go, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. All right. Well, to her right, we have another big heavyweight. I mean, this is like the best panel, I think, in a long time. I don't know how you find all these people, Brother Fred, but you just always bring the best. So now we have Brother Lauren Norris. Did I say that right? And he's got a lot of titles, so I'm not going to read them all, but he is the president of Tell It Like It Is. He's a producer, and he's producing 4 shows. I mean, you think producing 1 show is hard? He's producing 4. But how does he do it? I think this is in part how he can do so much. He's also part of the Maxwell leadership team, so that explains a lot. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So our president of Tell It Like It Is really just means I talk a lot. The biggest difference is there are a lot of people who talk a lot and they don't get paid for it. I insist that people pay me for it. That may be as a coach, maybe as a leadership keynote speaker, it may be in training classes that I teach, but my focus in life is what I call story power, and that is how do we see the stories that we tell impacting the who that we are and the people around us. And so story power is really my primary project as a leadership and communications coach, and so that's why Tell It Like It is important to me.
Love it. And this is important times today, important probably as ever to communicate the right message that people need to hear. So we're saving the best for last. He doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to let him just roll with it. You guys fasten your seatbelts. This is Brother Fred Mosley. He's a former judge, and he's got quite an accolade of things that he's done. I'm just going to roll it to him. Brother Fred, so good to have you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And I want to begin talking somewhat about Justice Ministries. And the reason I want to share concerning Justice Ministries is because you hear so much talk today that there's no justice. But people, including believers, are looking for justice in all the wrong places. They're looking for justice from the legislators. They're looking for justice from the judicial branch. And they're looking for justice from the executive branch of government. But I say to you that the only entity by and through whom we receive absolute and perfect justice is from God. And that's what these laws of life are about. Laws of life are absolute divine truths that govern the consequences of our actions. Everything we do and say activates one or more laws of life, either in a positive or in a negative way. What God does is that he uses those things we can see to help us understand the things that we cannot see. So he uses these things in the natural to show us how absolute his laws are, his natural and physical laws, whereas then we can transfer it over into the spirit realm. For instance, what happens when 32 degrees Fahrenheit comes about? whether it's in Texas, whether it's in Ohio, whether it's in Puerto Rico. Once it hits 32 degrees Fahrenheit, we know what is going to take place. The water is going to freeze. And that's an absolute. We accept it as being an absolute. And we know that we don't have to walk around the water and pray whether the water is going to turn to ice or not, because we know it's going to occur. So that's one of the examples in the physical, how God shows us how his laws are absolute. Another, two bodies cannot occupy the same space at the same time. If I wanted to sit on the chair where you are seated, Sergio, I couldn't do it. Why? Because I respect that there is a law involved.
Thank you. I
And
respect
that law,
too.
again, that law is two bodies cannot occupy the same space at the same time. If I wanted to leave the Dallas-Fort Worth area and go to Ohio, would I go by way of Miami, Florida? I don't think so. Why? Because the shortest distance between 2 points is always, not sometimes, not most times, not many times, but always a straight line. So God uses these things we can see so we can transfer it over to the spirit realm and come to accept the revelation that these spiritual laws, or these laws of life, are as absolute as these natural and physical laws that we adhere to on a daily basis. Unfortunately, most believers do not accept the proposition that everything that God made operates based upon a fixed law. These lights, Brother Norris knows this, these lights will not function unless certain things are done to cause them to operate. And these things are done in the natural to make certain we get the lights. We could not sit on these chairs if there were not some physical action, lights and not lights, but some physical activities involved that would cause us to be able to stay upright on these chairs. So the point we're endeavoring to make is that as these natural and physical laws are absolute, there are laws of life that are so absolute, so likewise absolute, such as the law of sowing and reaping. This is absolute. The law that God gave us in the garden, the foundational law for the laws of life, is the law of the Spirit of life. Romans 8:2 says to us, for the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has made us free from the law of sin and death. We were given the law of the Spirit of life in the garden. Adam and Eve were under the law of the Spirit of life. And the law of sin and death would not be activated unless and until Adam and Eve violated the command of the Lord concerning the forbidden fruit. But we can trace each of these spiritual laws back to the garden. And that's where the foundation was laid. The law of accountability and responsibility in the garden. The law of notice and warning in the garden. The law of the gift in the garden. The law of provision right there in the garden. Those 50 laws that God has challenged us to make available to the body of Christ, we can trace them all back to the garden. So I just want to get some impression of what the panel has to say, or their thoughts on this particular subject, or whatever questions they might have.
Yeah, so guys, obviously you have so much experience in your realms, and I think obviously the importance of these laws is like, that's interesting that we have a panel that has we have a little bit of diversity here. So let's see what we find as far as how these laws are applicable to, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, Brother Fred, you started talking about justice.
Yes.
So I want to kind of circle back to that. You know, Psalm 89:14 says, your throne, O God, is founded on righteousness and justice.
Yes.
And so the throne is his authority, which basically the kingdom of God is based on righteousness and justice. And I have found, especially in the American church, maybe in the evangelical church, been a lot of emphasis on righteousness. Not very much focus on justice, really, biblical justice. And it's core. It's right there at the foundation of the throne. It's at the foundation of the kingdom. And you're not going to have any sense of balance, fairness, equity, or justice as Fred was saying, outside of the Lord, outside of His Word, and the pursuit of, what I have found in my life, the pursuit of understanding the laws of life, as the Lord showed them to you, and applying them, is bringing God's justice, His right ways, and His equity into everyday life.
Can you give us an example of some way of how that has happened as far as, because I know this justice topic is hot, it's a hot button.
Well, I've had the privilege of staying in Brother Fred's home, and he goes through the paper and he's reading all these headlines and all these contemporary articles and say, well, that's the law of notice and warning. That's the law of sowing and reaping. He can see, he's got that lens, you know.
I know.
It's just the news comes alive, the headlines come alive when you begin to have this framework of the laws of life. It's just been fascinating for me.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really fascinating. What about you, Elizabeth?
I try to abide by the 10 laws that God gave us as the commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can do that, I think I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
how do we come up with these other laws when God's given us that?
Right? So basically, you're saying the Ten Commandments, but then also we're talking about these laws of life and the importance of that. So it's what are you guys' thoughts? Because I think we're also talking about two different things, right? We're talking about laws of life and also the commandments, but they're all related, pretty much.
It's all
Brother
related.
Fred, I want to go back to you before, or you guys
Well,
can.
if I may comment in that regard, is that, as we will recall, these laws of life were established in the garden, and that was before the Mosaic.
Okay.
The Mosaic was not given to us other than the fact that man had violated God's laws, and therefore we were fallen, we were of a fallen nature, and therefore we needed something that we could see. These laws of life that were established in the garden were never abolished. They were still in operation even after the Ten Commandments were instituted. Now, if you recall, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount said, "You have heard it said." And I suggest that he was making reference to the Mosaic. But I say unto you, and then he goes into, I perceive the laws of life. Also, if we were to do a study of the Mosaic, I think that we would place each of those 10 commandments in and under at least one or more laws of life. They would merge
Right.
into the laws of life.
Foundation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not a conflict, but it's an area that I perceive that the Lord has ordained us to clarify within, by and through the body of Christ, because there's a confusion in this area. Because anytime you mention the term law in the Christian community, the assumption is that you're talking about the Ten Commandments, that you're talking about the Mosaic law.
Right.
And people would have a tendency to turn you off, just as Elizabeth did a little while ago, as to whether or not you're still under the Ten Commandments and that that's all that you need. Now, you can put yourself under the Mosaic law if you choose to. There's another issue, and this is a very delicate issue, law and grace.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go back to the garden. What was given in the garden was the law of the Spirit of life, and then after that, we know that sin and death entered the equation because of disobedience.
Mm-hmm.
But there are two laws that were established in the garden initially: spirit of life, sin and death. Now, when we talk about grace, and certainly we are under grace, but does grace fall under one of those two major designations? We certainly know it's not under sin and death. So then does it come under the spirit of life? So I would suggest some profound thought as to whether or not grace comes under the law of the spirit of life.
All right, I
Any
know
other
you.
thoughts
I
on
know
that?
you want to jump in, and I actually almost feel like this is funny because I'm like, okay, we're open here. You guys can jump in. You don't have to but go ahead. I know.
There's so many things swimming around in my head, Sergio. You know, the first thing that comes to mind, I love the way Voddie Baucham said it. He said, you keep using this term social justice.
Right, come on.
But that word does not mean what you think it means.
Well said. Right.
And then he did an entire, I think it was a 2-hour teaching on the contrast between social justice as it's being used in society and in the public today versus biblical justice. And those are drastically different. But to take that same concept just a little bit further, I think there are a lot of people who cry for justice who wouldn't know what to do with it if they got it. They cry out for justice, but they wouldn't know what to do with it when they got it. And the reason that I say that is because, as Brother Mosley said, that we have this law of sin and death, and then we have the gift of life, which is the free gift of life, which comes through the grace of God. You've got grace on one side and mercy on the other. One says, you're not going to get what you do deserve. That's mercy. Grace says you are going to get what you don't deserve. And so justice is the one that says, nope, you're going to get what you deserve. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get relieved of what you don't deserve or what you do deserve, and you're not going to get something that you don't deserve. You're going to get exactly what you deserve. Now, when I think about the headlines today, and I see a 50-year-old man rescues a teenage girl who's being abducted for the purpose of sex trafficking.
Right.
The guy beats him with a pistol, steals his truck and drives away, and the cops arrest the old man for assault. Wait, what? What kind of justice is that? People try to break into somebody's home, they defend their home with a firearm, and suddenly they're the ones under prosecution. There's something wrong with this. We know, though, that scripturally speaking, in the end times, the right will be wrong and wrong will be right. Romans 1:21 says will be given over to a debased mind, meaning they've gone so far from the truth that they couldn't tell the truth if it slapped them in the face, and that they cry for justice. And I'm thinking to myself, if you even for a moment got what you actually deserved, you could tell us how hot hell is. It wasn't made for man, but it is the destination of those who have completely turned their back on God and refused to submit to him and surrender and simply say, I got it, I can't fix this, I can't do it on my own. There's no amount of me that can abide by the law. And yet, every one of the laws of life have a pro and a con, if you will. If this, then this. And whatever the if is, then is unavoidable. If you plant jalapenos, you will never harvest pineapple trees. Absolutely. It's just not going to happen. I don't care how hard you try or how much you wish or how much you adore the law of attraction. Pineapple seeds produce pineapple trees. Jalapenos produce jalapenos. And it's just as simple as that.
No, I absolutely love that. So justice, I think that's kind of the hot topic right now. So it's really important to get clarity on that. And I think with the panel that we have here, if you guys are hopefully taking notes, I'm taking notes because it's always a learning experience. And whenever you have, I think we have to be open to truth. Truth sets us free, but people get so close-minded and like, oh, it's because I haven't heard it said that way, then it must not be true. But I think we have to be open-minded. But I want to go back to Brother Fred and this topic of justice. You know, you are a former judge. I mean, you know what's going on in our current times, and how do you see that applying with? I mean, you obviously hit it out of the ballpark with with the relevancy of our society and what current events we're dealing with. But how does again going back to this importance of the laws? I was actually thinking, and maybe at another point we start calling them key laws of life or something, because they're such key. And I think also people need to learn how to take kind of like a little bit at a time, because there's a lot. You have how many? 50 laws?
Yes.
So, and a lot of them are not familiar with, they're just learning about, reaping and sowing, or the law of attraction, or, so there's just so much to learn. But go ahead and bring us back to that justice subject. I think that's the big one.
Most believers, as the world, is of the impression that justice ends at man's courthouse. It does not. Because that's not absolute and complete justice. God's justice goes far beyond that. And when I hear someone saying, well, that we didn't get justice in a particular situation, they're looking at the decision that came from a secular court. God sees all. He knows all. He knows what is necessary to bring about that which represents perfect justice in that situation. He may go back decades in order to make things right. But one satisfaction we can have as believers, once we understand the justice of God, is that He will make it right.
That's right.
And this is where I perceive that we've lost sight, because many of us, if we didn't get the legislation that we thought we should have gotten, they feel that justice was not served. If there was a decision made in the Supreme Court or some other lower court, the attitude is that justice was not served. If they didn't get an executive order the way they thought it should have been drafted, that we didn't get justice. But God sees all, and He knows what we don't have any idea what should be dealt with in that particular situation. So that once was a time, I felt the same way as many, that justice was not served. But now I know that's not the end of it. And the end of it may come after I've been called home, but I know that under the justice of God, that He will make it right.
Come on, that's going to preach. I'm feeling like there's so much right there on that what we're honing in, that's kind of hitting some of you guys that are watching. It's hopefully bringing hope. I mean, it brings hope a lot to me just to hear that, it doesn't end at men's courthouse, because there's a higher court, right, in heaven. And so there's hope even when it seems hopeless, even when, like you're saying, maybe the laws of the land are not on our favor. So that should bring us hope. I kind of want you to hone in on this a little bit. We got about 5 minutes, but would you mind just with the audience, just giving them a little bit of an encouragement on this subject of justice? Because I feel like there's a lot of people facing this.
Yeah, just right from the headlines, in Fort Worth, where I live, Fort Worth, Texas, the 4th Police Department has over 900 cold cases that they've given up. They're hopeless. They've tried everything that man can do. Some of these go back to the 1960s. And we had a man in our church whose sister was killed when he was almost 45 years ago. And he's carried that sense of loss. It was a cold case, a famous cold case in Fort Worth. And our church started praying. And we went to the higher court. And we went because God was watching all that. And I want you to know, 45 years later, the police resurrected some stuff and new DNA, and that a whole case was solved and made the headlines, made the papers. That man's in prison now in his mid-70s. I think he's in his late 70s before they caught him. And we got all encouraged. There's something. Think of all those families though out there, all the hurting people that don't have justice, don't have any hope. They're just heartsick over these cold cases. We found out there's a higher law, right?
Yeah.
To the law of
Wow.
God. It was powerful. So we've actually started really praying about some of those things. And so I would just encourage people, I don't care how bad your situation is, how hopeless it seems, how many decades you've been carrying a sense of injustice, hurt, wrong, loss. God's, as Fred said so eloquently, God's watching all that. He has an answer, and you can appeal to the highest court, to the God of heaven. And He's listening, and He's looking. But you have to believe. He says those that come to Him must believe that He is, and that He's the rewarder of those that diligently seek Him, from Hebrews 11:6. So you've got to believe that your prayers are going to make the difference. You're going to have to believe that if you go and pray, He's going to answer. That's what He's waiting for, is for you to have some faith and believe, and go to that higher court and ask for a breakthrough.
Let me add to that if I
Yeah.
can too.
Please.
One of the most powerful representations of genuine justice happened the day that Jesus was on the cross.
Yes.
The man next to Him had lived a life that was not worthy of redemption. And maybe you've lived a life that you can look back at right now and go, if you only knew what I've done, you would have put me in jail or set me on fire many, many years ago.
Right.
But the man on the cross knew for a fact, knew in his heart and in his head, I have done absolutely nothing that makes me worthy of the next life. And yet, infinite justice, ultimate justice, as decided by the King who has the right to decide, looked at him and said, Because of your belief, today you'll be with me in paradise. That is justice.
Brother Fred, last words. We got about 2 minutes. Gonna wrap up our segment here. What do you have some last words for our viewers today?
Excuse me. Hopefully, our viewers have gotten some impression as to these laws of life and how important they are. And hopefully, they will have a deeper desire, if they have not already, to learn more about these laws of life, especially when we look at the natural examples that we have and how absolute those natural examples are. And to be able to carry those natural examples over to the spirit realm. And once you can make that shift, then you come to understand that God is in control of all of this. His laws prevail over all of it. And his laws will be the one that will prevail and will also stand tall above everything else that may be in the way. So that's what we want our viewers to understand and give them an appetite to learn more about kingdom laws, because those are the highest laws of the universe.
Oh, wow, that's so good. So we are whetting your appetite here, because the next segment that we're going to do, we're actually going to dive into one of these laws. I think we're doing the law of notice and warning. So stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you have some hope here. God gives us grids of using real life laws so that we can understand God's laws. And I love it because God has the last word, and He has He's going to declare whatever is just, ultimately just, no matter what. So we love you guys, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much for watching. We love you. Take care. Thank you guys. You guys did awesome.
Thank you, sir.